we can look at his plan for the DC universe to call the DC universe, to lay out a slate of films for the DC universe and call it Gods and Monsters. That right there shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what's great about the DC universe. Now, it's very logical for outsiders, people who don't really love the DC characters or that universe, to look in and say, yeah, I mean, their heroes are just, a lot of the heroes have sort of these godlike powers. Yeah. And there's like Swamp Thing. There's all, so what's wrong with Gods and Monsters? That makes sense. That makes sense. Sure. To somebody who knows nothing about DC or why it's so wonderful, and nobody who cares about the characters might think that. Superman, the most godlike character, you could never tell Superman to his face, well, you're basically a god. He would not hear that. That's not how he thinks about himself. That's not how people in his universe think about him. People in the DC universe, they look up to these heroes. They appreciate that these heroes are there to save them. When George Perez did the Marvel DC crossover, that was one of the things that was a conflict between the two different heroes. The Marvel heroes were coming into the DC universe and going, these people are okay with you. And they're kind of, and DC heroes were coming into the Marvel universe and like, why are these guys your heroes, right? Why is the public against you so much? It's a difference. It's a fundamental difference in the universes. And it works fine. Either one of those is fine in their own universe. But this has been the problem with DC, whether it's the comics, the movies, the shows, or whatever. No one has just embraced that. The DC is a different universe. It works differently. You wouldn't look at the DC, if you were in the DC universe, you wouldn't look at your heroes and say, yeah, gods and monsters. So the very fact that he's even naming the universe or his slate of films that definitely betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of the characters, a fundamental focus on anything that's good and really well understood about the characters. The other aspect of this, so you can see that, his planning, his ideas, the movies he's got, the way he talks about them and whatnot, also betray a fundamental misunderstanding of the characters. Then you have these chuckleheads, these just naive souls, bless their hearts. They still hold to this idea. I mean, how can you judge it if you haven't seen it? I'll go see it before I start to criticize. Again, just bless their little hearts. What a wonderful little world these people must live in. Grow up, grow a brain for once in your life. That's not how movies work. That's not how movies work. Okay. We're not in the era anymore where this, like the studio era of Hollywood, where the studios determine what the movies would be. Once in the golden age of Hollywood, it used to be, this studio would do Westerns. This studio would do musicals. This studio would do dramas or whatever. And the directors were kind of interchangeable. The actors themselves were often treated as cattle, interchangeable, loaned out a little bit, but, here and there. That changed around World War II, a little bit before, during, and after, when we started to see the rise of the auteur filmmaker. And it's a French term. French critics of film noir even came up with this idea. But they said the director himself should really be the real author of the film. And that's just the way it is now. And Warner Brothers, in particular, really holds to this, at least, in recent years, where the director, you think about somebody like Alfred Hitchcock. If someone sits you down and say you're going to watch a Hitchcock film, certain things to expect. He's done enough movies and he's been consistent with his themes in enough different ways where that these are this storyteller's theme. And that's the same thing for authors of novels, authors of comic books. If they're a little bit more true to their stories and really, really creating good art, not just necessarily writing for the next franchise, the next deadline, just kind of putting out some fluff or whatever. The author is going to have their own themes and their own ideas and their own characters. Gore Vidal had that wonderful quote about how we all have a certain cast of characters in our mind. Any writer does. And if you look at enough of that writer's work, you'll see them cast those different character types in different characters throughout their work. That's just the nature of writing. And it's the nature of directors being the auteur of their own films. That Hitchcock, if you watch a Hitchcock film, it's going to deal with, if it's especially one of his later films, most likely an icy blonde or an untouchable woman somehow, an untouchable ideal or a dream of a woman, the anima, so to speak. You're going to have a lot of staircase scenes. You're going to have probably some national monuments or national sites and what like that. You're going to have the character of the wrong man, the guy who's mistaken identity kind of thing. He likes to play with those themes. And you can do that. You can look at a filmmaker and say, I know that these are the types of movies they make. These are the type of themes that they deal with. These are the type of characters they tend to write. And you can say, is that a good fit for this character? You don't need to go see the movie first. No, you can know that that's not a good fit for that character. And it's not that filmmakers can't surprise you now and then. Hitchcock himself actually did a screwball comedy early in his career before he was really Hitchcock. But he was, but it's still very much a Hitchcock style film. And he was kind of, sweet on the actress. It was his friend who wanted him to do it. But it's still very much a Hitchcock film. The themes and whatnot are still there. Let's look at James Gunn and look at the types of films that he's done. Because again, you can look at a filmmaker, you can see their example, their what they're known for. So let's talk about typical James Gunn movies. Now, he hasn't had a whole plethora of films. I'm not going to include Slither in this, though you probably could, but Slither is a horror film, so you might say it's a little different. But he still has the same kind of main character. James Gunn likes to take main characters, and we have here Super, Rainn Wilson in Super. Now, I liked Super. I liked that movie for what it was. I like Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not interested in Suicide Squad because it still takes place in the same DC continuity. I don't see why anybody would. But look at these three films. Super, if you haven't seen it, Rainn Wilson's character wants to be a superhero. His wife leaves him, but he thinks this drug dealer has like abducted his wife or whatever. So he's going to go out and, the joke is on him. Throughout the whole movie, the joke's on Rainn Wilson. Now, I'm not saying it's poorly done. It's well done for that kind of movie and for that kind of character, because you do empathize with Rainn Wilson, and in his own sort of demented little dream world, he does achieve a certain kind of victory. And, you in that context, you're like, yeah, all right. That's not Superman. Okay. Well, that's just that one movie, Prof. That's just that one movie. Oh, well, let's look at Guardians of the Galaxy. Is Star-Lord similar to that? Does Star-Lord share that lack of self-awareness? Absolutely. Absolutely. He's this walking, gaping mommy issue wound in that whole first movie, even into the second movie. The second movie, they try and pull out the daddy issues. And I like Guardians of the Galaxy. I think James Gunn did a fine job with those because those characters matched his style, matched his take on characters. But he likes to have main characters who are not very self-aware, and the joke is kind of on them throughout most of the movie. Now, again, not to their detriment. They do pull out the heroism in the end, and they do achieve some sort of victory of their own sort of twisted ideas about themselves and the world around them. But the joke's very much kind of on them as you go through. Same thing with characters in Suicide Squad, like Peacemaker. I've seen enough clips and read the synopsis of it to know that he does the same thing in Suicide Squad with these characters. These are the kinds of movies that James Gunn makes. He's never done anything different. This is his theme. This is buried in the root of his soul. This is the type of movies that he makes. He's shown you that. And you might say, well, you don't know that. Maybe he wants to do something different now. Okay, if he did, then he would have to say that, right? You would expect him to say in the interviews, you know what? I've always loved Superman. I've never had a chance to really get to the character like now. And I'm so excited that I finally have the chance to write the character because, man, it's been inside me for so long and I'm so excited. Or even, recently I've come to really appreciate the character. Recently I've just come to like, wow, I'm so impressed and I really want to celebrate the character. No. This is what James Gunn has said. We're going to walk you through a couple of quotes here from James Gunn. All right, this is the first one that we'll start with. This is James Gunn talking about, and thank you to Fan Man for showing me and sharing me these images, these stories. He says, I initially said no to doing Superman. When he's doing Suicide Squad, I initially said no to Superman because I didn't have a way in that felt unique and fun and emotional, that gave Superman the dignity he deserved. Okay. So, at that stage, I applaud you, James Gunn. You realize that you don't know the character and he deserves a dignity that you don't know how to give him. Okay. Then he says, then a bit less than a year ago, I saw a way in many ways centering around Superman's heritage, how both his aristocratic Kryptonian parents and his Kansas farmer parents inform who he is and the choices he makes. He's going to base Superman on conflict. Okay, Superman did not grow up in Krypton. He was an infant when he left. He doesn't remember Krypton. He has no concept of himself as aristocracy. Now, he does learn about his Kryptonian heritage from Jor-El in the Fortress of Solitude and whatnot, and he learns what his family was and all of that, but there's no conflict within him. He is Kansas bred American human. That's who Superman is at heart. And if you think there's any conflict within him about that, then you totally misunderstand the character. Superman is a human American boy. That's exactly who he knows he is at heart. It's like that wonderful, and it's not that he has anything against his parents, Jor-El and Lara. There's an end of Superman Kryptonite, which came out in under a different title originally, but Darwin Cook wrote it and Tim Sale drew it. Wonderful title. You need to go check that out. And it's about Superman first discovering that kryptonite could hurt him. And it's in the course of that story, he first learns about Jor-El and his birth parents and all of that. And there's a scene at the very end of the book when he's sitting on the front porch with Ma and Pa Kent, and he's telling them what he's learned about his heritage. And they say, well, I guess we'll need to call you Kal-El now then, right? And he said, Ma, Pa, he said, I love my birth parents. I really respect, and I'm so happy that Jor-El and Lara sacrificed all they did and gave me what they could give me. But one thing I've learned is that I'm Clark Kent. You know, he comes to that realization again. There's no conflict within him whatsoever. And, you know, people are going to just fall all over themselves to try to, you know, make some sort of logical way for this to happen. Well, maybe this movie's about him realizing that. No, he doesn't have to realize that. He doesn't have to learn how to kill. He doesn't have to. It's like with the Batman. Well, that movie was about him learning that he needs to be the symbol. No, he doesn't have to learn it. That's what he realizes the moment the bat comes crashing in his window, and he realizes that's the symbol I need to take on to fight crime. No, but people want that new stuff. They need that crack. They need that cinema, new content hashtags to go fawn all over themselves about. So this was him talking about, I need to weigh into the character. So you know that James Gunn's not somebody who grew up loving this character. There are a lot of filmmakers out there. Would somebody give freaking Brad Bird a chance? Would somebody let Paul Dini write a script? Would somebody, you know, plenty of people out there who makes logical sense to give this to. But no, they're going to give it to somebody who has to kind of figure out a way that he might be able to get into the character. Let's move along to some other of his quotes here. Here we go. This is him talking about his thoughts on Superman in particular, and why he quote unquote likes Superman. He says here, I really love the idea of Superman. All right, first let's just take that. The idea of Superman. This is clearly somebody who doesn't love the character, doesn't really understand the character, hasn't had any time with the character. The character doesn't mean anything to him in his personal life. I like the idea of Superman. And he says, he's a big old galoot. That's how James Gunn thinks of his main characters. Look at Super. Look at Rainn Wilson's character in Super. Look at Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy. Look at characters like the Peacemaker in Suicide Squad. These are the types of main characters that he likes to write. Big old galoots. Clumsy, oafish, silly, not very good, not very self-aware, but you find things in them that you kind of like. And he said, he's a farm boy from Kansas who's very idealistic. We shouldn't look at Superman and think he's the different one. He's the weird one for being idealistic. We should look at his idealism and think, man, I need to be like that. I need to be like that. You don't have Superman walk into the room and everybody's like, oh, there's that guy. Oh, him and his ideals. Oh, his don't kill rule. No, you look at Superman, and if you think that, then you don't understand Superman. You look at Superman and you see somebody who has those high ideals and lives them and shows you that they're possible and that you need to be better yourself and you want to be like him. Unless you understand Superman in that way, you have no concept of who Superman is, and don't even try to bring your crap movies to my TV screen for that. No, that's not Superman, and you don't get it, James Gunn. He's a farmer boy, very idealistic. His greatest weakness is that he'll never kill anybody. That's a weakness to James Gunn. James Gunn thinks it's a weakness that Superman will never kill. This man has no business touching Superman in any way. He doesn't want to hurt a living soul. I like that sort of innate goodness about Superman. It's his defining characteristic. Yes, it is, but you don't understand how we're supposed to respond to that. You have no business writing Superman. James Gunn said Superman is a big old galoot. He's just, he's so idealistic. He's just a big old galoot. His greatest weakness is that he won't kill. These are words from James Gunn's mouth. These are the characters that James Gunn has written before. This is not the right treatment to give Superman. you know filmmakers, you know the types of films they do. You can see it by their history of filmmaking. You come to learn the auteur filmmaker. You know their themes, you know their characters. James Gunn did a great job with these movies because these characters played in to his themes, to his ideas, to the types of characters he likes to write. He's fooling himself, and he's got a bunch of people across this world duped for hope.